All right, what is up, gang? This is your boy Mel, aka Naldo Formula One, and you are now tuned into the Naldo F1 podcast. This is going to be episode 17. We got this thing rocking and rolling, man. We 3 weeks in this joint, back to back to back. I'm in a rhythm, I'm in a groove, I'm feeling good, I'm living good. Hope all of you out there that are listening are feeling good and living good as well. We're really blessed just to be here and wake up and see another day. The sun is out, it's shining, it's hot as hell down here in Houston, but we moving regardless, man. So before I go ahead and get into the juicy stuff, man, make sure you guys just pause the video for a second or pause the audio wherever you're listening to this or watching this. Go ahead and subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you're interacting with. To be honest, man, go do both. So if you're on video right now, go on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever you listen to your podcast and subscribe and follow the show. And if you're on audio, make sure you head over to the YouTube channel and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the bell for the notification so you know every time I drop any kind of content, and run up the likes, the comments, engagements, man. I said this for the past couple of weeks, but it really doesn't cost you guys anything to do it, and it means the world to me when you guys do it. Whenever I see a new subscriber pop up, man, I light up, because when in reality, when we put it into perspective, if 20 people came up to you in real life and said, "Hey, man, I love your content," you'd be feeling amazing about yourself that day. Like 20 people come up out of their way to tell you, "Oh, I really like your content," or "I watched your video," or "I listened to your audio podcast and I really rocked with it." That would mean a lot to you. Like, you would probably be lit up the whole day. But in this era of digital world that we're living in, and content creation and pushing for more and more millions of people and hundreds of thousands of people to rock with you, we feel like that's not enough. Even though in reality, it would be crazy for 20 to 30 people to come up and say that, "Hey, I like your content," or "I like what you're doing over there," or "I'm listening to you," or "I'm watching you." That means a lot. So I try to keep all of that in a perspective while this channel is still pretty small, and knowing that, hey, even if 5 people said they liked my video, that would mean a lot to me. And so, yeah, man, I appreciate you guys for tuning in and just rocking with me. And we're going to keep this thing moving and keep this thing grooving. For sure, man. So, all right, we are post... I was about to say Hungary. That was last weekend. We are post Belgian Grand Prix. The race was this morning. It was an okay race, decent, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. We'll get into the meat and potatoes of the episode later on, but it was a decent race, man. But we are officially halfway through the season. The summer break has started, and there will be no racing for about a month. Yeah, about 3.5 weeks, pretty much a month to the day. There won't be racing until Zandvoort on August 25th is the beginning of the race weekend. So practice will start on August 25th. The Grand Prix won't be until August 27th. So I'm going to be struggling for these next couple of weeks finding just things to watch. I'm going to keep the content flowing and stay on this nice little rhythm that I'm on. But as far as just trying to find things to talk about and find things to watch in that meantime, I'm gonna have to really dive in and find some shows and new animes and stuff to watch. My watch list is extensive, and for whatever reason, it's just it can be tough for me to get into new things at times. So yeah, if you guys know of any shows or got any animes or movies or whatever to recommend, I think I might go try to catch Oppenheimer today. I still haven't seen it yet, and I've heard nothing but good things about it. So maybe that'll be on the cards for today. Maybe catch a little matinee on a smooth Sunday. We'll see. But back to racing. Yeah, summer break is here. If you're not familiar with Formula One and like regulations and stuff, the teams aren't allowed to work at all during the summer break. So this is a legitimate break. The employees are taking their time off. You are not allowed to develop the cars. You're not allowed to bring upgrades or develop new upgrades, shall I say, because Mercedes are bringing upgrades post summer break, but these are upgrades that have already been signed off on, already been approved, and will be put on the car post summer break, and they've already been created. So they're not developing new stuff throughout the summer break. They're very strict on that as far as being the FIA, with not allowing teams to take advantage of their employees during the summer break. And I really respect that, because we know a lot of working culture in the US is just grind, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle. Companies are trying to extract every little piece out of their employees that they possibly can, to the detriment of their employees' well-being a lot of times. And I think that's a very American concept, and just a very capitalist mindset, that work should be your number one priority in life, and that your entire life should revolve around your job. And I really respect other cultures for not making it that way, like giving their employees proper time off, and giving them, just making them feel like people and not like machines. So shout out to Formula One for sticking to that, and I hope that all the guys working in the factories and the mechanics and the pit crews and engineers and that sort of thing, that they get some proper time off to spend with their families, and the drivers and team principals and execs too. They need it too, because Formula One is so intense and it's so stressful, and it's a traveling circus. Every single weekend you got something major going on, and the teams are so locked in and the drivers are so locked in that it can be hard to just take a deep breath and focus on other things. So shout out to the FIA for staying firm on the break periods being break periods. So yeah, I respect it, and I can't be too mad at it. As far as like silly season chat, we haven't heard a whole lot about driver movement, and to be honest, I kind of expected that. I didn't really think that there would be too much movement outside of what's already happened. I think a lot of the teams are very happy with the lineups that they have at the moment, at least. So I really didn't expect too much movement from the driver's perspective. What I didn't expect was executives and team principals moving around. So if you haven't heard the news, Otmar Safnauer, not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry, Otmar, if I'm butchering your name, but it's Otmar Safnauer, the team principal for Alpine Racing, or Alpine Formula One team, has been notified that he will not continue with the team post Belgium Grand Prix. So basically, from right now, he is no longer team principal of Alpine Formula One team, which I was pretty shocked to see, to be honest. You really don't see that too often from Formula One teams as far as getting rid of executives mid-season. We've seen here and there that teams will get rid of drivers and stuff like that mid-season, but you really don't see too often teams dumping their team principal mid-season. The team principal is normally supposed to be a steady hand and a stabilizing figure within the team. And so Alpine are kind of in a bit of chaos, I would assume, right now. And I think they've not just dumped the team principal, but I think they've dumped a lot of other employees too. So it's basically just my dog Esteban, Esty Bestie, and Pierre left on the team. And I think they're doing a complete overhaul and revamp. So we'll see how that turns out for them. I kind of caught me off guard. That was announced, a couple of days ago. I think that was announced on Thursday or Friday, that they would not be returning to the team post summer break. And that kind of sent the F1 world into frenzy, because you just don't expect that. And so I'm interested to see who they're going to replace. I think Ferrari have gotten rid of their lead strategist. I believe he's a strategist. And I think it was necessary. Ferrari have put in some pretty poor performances from the strategy team, and they just don't always seem like they're on one accord. And I feel like it's definitely starting to fester within the teams and the drivers, and that tension is just starting to ferment and bubble over a little bit. So I think that major changes are coming for Ferrari as well. And I feel like this could be a trickle-down effect, and probably the silly season will end up being a sort of race for executives and not so much drivers, because we're not going to really, I don't think we're really going to see that big move where a top seat opens up for this the 2024 season. So it'll probably be more about the team principals and the executives and strategists and that sort of thing, and more movement behind the scenes as opposed to movement within the cars and the drivers. So yeah, that we'll see what happens and how this continues to develop throughout the summer break, and who ends up where when it's all said and done moving into 2024. Let's see. Let's talk about the race for a little bit. We'll get through that because I got a lot to talk about today, and this episode will probably end up being one of my longer ones. We'll see, but I'm assuming that this will be one of my longer episodes. And so let's run through the race real quick. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about, to be honest. Max took a 5-place grid penalty for taking a new gearbox in the race, and so he got pole position on track and through qualifying, but he started 6th place. He was up to 4th before the end of the Kemmel Straight. So after turn 4, he was in 4th already, and he led the race about, I think, 17 or 18 laps in. It was kind of a running bet in the F1 community as to how long it would take Max to lead the race. It wasn't under the assumption that if he would get into the lead, it was more so just when he would get into the lead. So that definitely didn't take long whatsoever for him to get back in the lead. And once he was in the lead, he was gone. His pace is just unreal. It pains me to say it, but he is the best driver on the grid at the moment. He's the best driver in the best car, and his pace is just unmatched. I mean, Toto Wolff said it at the end of last week that it looked like he was an F1 driver and everybody else is in F2 cars. And that's what the pace gap looks like. And obviously the car is a rocket ship and the car is amazing, and Red Bull have produced a real monster. But being that they've the only team that have won races this season, but I mean 90% of that is Max. So, and you see where Checo ends up putting himself a lot of weekends, and he had a good weekend this weekend, but his run of form for the past 6 or 7 races has not been great. And so there's always a huge argument in the Formula One community as to whether it's the car or the driver that produces results. And it's obviously a combination of both, but you gotta give a lot of credit to the drivers, because we've seen it during the Mercedes era of dominance that on most weekends, Valtteri couldn't touch Lewis. And we're seeing it now with Max that the car is great, but none of Max's teammates have really ever been able to touch him since he was teammates with Daniel back in 2018. So it's got to be a good mixture of driver and car, but you got to give credit to the drivers because the cars don't drive themselves. You're the one that has to put in the performances. You're the one that has to hit the apexes and get the good corner exit and find the lap time where it looks like there is none. So Max gets a ton of credit from me, and all the drivers get a ton of credit from me, because the car can be quick and be capable, but you have to actually extract that time out of the car every single lap, and Max is doing that. He's in his dominance era right now, and he could probably close this championship out by round 15 and be chilling for the last 6 races. Maybe then he'll let somebody else win a race, but knowing Max, that's probably not the case. He was joking on the radio with his race engineer, GP, that, yeah, I could build another gap to my teammate and we could pit again and work on pit stop practice. And if I'm Checo, I'm like, damn, that's what he thinks of me. He's like, I'm just chilling, casual, 18 seconds ahead of my teammate by the end of the race. Like, it's just ridiculous. He is taking his 8th race victory in a row, and who knows how long he's gonna stretch this out. Pause. But I do think, I said it last week, and I do think he's gonna end up beating Sebastian Vettel's record of 9 race wins in a row. I mean, his home race is the next race in the Netherlands at Zandvoort. Great track, old school roller coaster circuit, and he's always gone well around there for the past couple of years that it's been on the calendar. So I full and well expect him to win that race handily, and then who knows how far he'll take it after that. We'll have to just wait and see. But if I was a betting man, I would definitely put my money on Max to win that. To break that record pretty handily, and he'll probably break it by a couple races. Who knows? He can win 14, 15, 16 races in a row with the form that he's on right now. As far as the race, the one thing I wanted to touch on a little bit, and this will probably be my longest segment of just talking about Belgium because there just wasn't a whole lot to talk about. It was a lot of midfield movement and stuff, but not a whole lot of really interesting things going on at the top. I mean, the top 4 were pretty much the same for, I would say, 70% of the race. But the one thing I wanted to touch on was what's going on with the driving standards, like what the expectation is of the drivers and how they give out penalties and what's going on with the stewards and the FIA, because I'm at a loss at this point. It seems like every weekend the standard is different, and certain rules apply to certain people and certain rules don't, and certain things that are normally racing incidents are not. It's in other weekends, or it just I'm at a loss. I really don't get it. So first thing was in the sprint race on Saturday morning, there was an incident between Checo and Lewis where Lewis dove down the inside of a corner that traditionally you're not able to overtake at, but Lewis just had more pace at the moment, and the gap was there, and any racing driver with any sort of pedigree is going to go for that gap. And Checo just went a little bit deep into the corner, and Lewis went for it, and it looked like the move was on, and it was a overall clean move, and Checo had a snap of oversteer, and Lewis at the exact same time had a wash of understeer into the corner. And so understeer is just when the car won't turn when you're trying to turn it. So he's not maximum lock, but he's trying to get the car to turn right, and the car just won't turn. It keeps drifting towards the outside of the corner. And oversteer is just when the car loses the rear end, when it fishtails a little bit, and both of those things happen simultaneously for the drivers. And Lewis just had a little bump on Checo's side pod, just a little touch, and it wasn't any extended contact. He didn't turn him around. He didn't shove him all the way off the track, but there was a decent amount of damage to Checo's car. Now, Checo was a little bit dramatic in the post-race interview when he was saying that Lewis took out the entire right side of his car. It was a big hole in the side pod, but he didn't take out the entire side of the car. And it was minimal contact. And what not even just me, but a lot of other personalities in the racing community thought was just a racing incident, nothing major, and was almost immediately slapped with a 5-second penalty for that incident. And the FIA and the stewards have told us on multiple occasions that the result and the outcome does not impact what type of punishment that they dish out to drivers. It's about the incident in a vacuum. So was unable to keep going, or Checo crashed out or whatever. That doesn't impact the penalty that they give. They're only giving the penalty based on what the incident was. So in my opinion, it was minimal contact. Lewis didn't do anything heinous, but pretty much instantly got slapped with a 5-second penalty, which I thought was harsh and a little bit unfair for such minimal contact. And I feel like they only gave that penalty because Checo picked up damage and lost positions and didn't end up scoring points in the sprint race. And so which is basically the exact opposite of what they told us was the case in the standard, that the outcome doesn't weigh in on the punishment for that they give out for the incident. And then to follow that up, and we've seen that done. Sorry, I feel like my volume just went up, but I felt passionate about it. And we've seen incidents like that earlier in the season, which is what is really frustrating, because we saw that pretty much that exact same incident with George and Max in a sprint race in Baku, where George went up the inside, drifted a little bit wide, bumped into Max's side pod. For that, we've seen Max run people off the track. We've seen drivers get super aggressive with defense or attacking and not receive penalties for minimal contact. I mean, hell, even if we go back to like ran Lewis off the road over the sausage curbs, and Lewis probably damaged a little bit of his floor going over that, and they bumped and made minimal contact, and no penalty was given out for that. But Lewis, in like damp conditions on a wet track, when he gave Checo more than a car's width of space to operate and minimal contact, just immediately receives a 5-second penalty. I don't understand it. And then moving forward, tying that back into Spa this morning or afternoon, wherever you watched it, wherever time zone you were at when you watched it, Checo off the line immediately darts right to defend the inside as Lewis goes outside to try to swoop around the outside. But then he swoops to the right to defend, and then he swoops immediately back left and cuts Lewis off again, which in my opinion is making double moves to defend positions. And the normal racing standard is that you make one move to defend your position, and you don't get to cut back across to cut another driver off. And so for that not to be investigated at all, and I'm not saying that he deserved a penalty for it, but for it to not even be looked at or investigated, that was the first thing that popped up into my mind when I turned on the race and saw the start, was that did he not just make two moves to defend a position when normally that's not allowed? So I'm kind of left a little bit stunned as to what the hell the standard is, because certain drivers get away with things on certain weekends and then other times they can't, or certain rules apply to certain drivers. I'm not going to go as far as to say that, the FI don't give out penalties to Red Bull, or it's only Red Bull drivers, or they're targeting Lewis specifically. I'm not saying that, but can we just keep the shit consistent, bro? Can we just like keep the standard the same for everybody? So if minimal contact is just going to be a racing incident on this weekend in damp conditions, when they were side by side, Lewis was fully alongside, can the standard be held the same at the following weekend when it's two different drivers? We just want a little bit of consistency. That's all I ask for. I don't think that I'm asking for a whole lot when I say that. But that's my rant as far as like the driving standards. Not too much to talk about. Oscar and Carlos took each other out after Oscar was having an amazing weekend. Oscar bogged down at the start, didn't get the greatest start, and just got pinched into turn one as Carlos locked up trying to avoid Lewis and just took a really aggressive line onto the inside. I don't think he saw Oscar at all. Then Oscar got pinched into the wall, broke his suspension, I believe, and then as a result, Carlos got damage on his side pod and just fell down the order. Now, why Ferrari took so long to retire him, I have no clue. They should have just, once he fell out of the points and was just continually falling back, they retired the car. Just retire the car, save the engine for another day. You weren't racing for anything. They waited till I think lap 23 to retire Carlos, which didn't make sense to me. But that's just Ferrari doing Ferrari things. What else did we really expect? Checo delivered, I think, this weekend. He did what he was supposed to. He had a decent weekend. It was a Red Bull 1-2, the first Red Bull 1-2 in a while. And So he's had two back-to-back good weekends where he delivered podiums like he was supposed to, but he still can't touch Max with a 10-foot pole. I mean, once Max breezed past him on the Kemmel Straight, and it just never looked back. Checo never put up a fight, never seemed like a threat. And I mean, what else did we really expect? There's just not a whole lot of drivers out there that can really fuck with Max on his day. And it seems like every day is Max's day. And so yeah, his Checo just can't touch Max with a 10-foot pole. So I think his best bet is to just keep trying to put it on the podium and make sure that they secure the constructors championship, which I mean, Max, I believe, is winning the constructors championship by himself. He has enough points for that, and so he technically don't really need Checo, but it's just nice to have your rear gun. So he delivered what he needed to, and I think that if he continues on this trajectory, his race seat will be safe for now at least. Let's get into the biggest dubs and L's of the weekends for teams and drivers. Biggest team dub of the weekend, the team that stood out to me the most just had to be Red Bull. I think that's the obvious answer. Getting a 1-2 is always going to net you a positive in my book. And they pretty much dominated the race. They showed their pace. And yeah, they came good all weekend. Not really too much to say about that. Driver dub, I would have to say probably Charles. For me, it was between Charles and Checo. I would have to give it to Charles because it looked like they were they struggled last weekend. They came into this weekend. Charles put it in P2 in qualifying. Good result for him, and then was able to fend off the Mercedes, which was surprising to me. I thought that Mercedes, or at least the Mercedes in the hands of Lewis, would have the race pace to overtake Charles, especially running the lower downforce rear wing where he would have less drag and more top speed on a track that was dry, even though we didn't know what the conditions would be like for the race this Sunday. But for Charles to be able to hold off Lewis and pretty much kind of keep him at bay, there was a couple moments where Lewis looked like he threatened to take that position, but Charles was able to keep him at bay. And I think that was a really good performance for him to take another podium this season. So yeah, I think he would probably have to take my driver dub. I think Checo kind of just did what he's supposed to, and so I don't know if I could give him the nod. Shout out to Fernando too. Fernando had a really good performance, putting it P5 this weekend when Aston have been struggling for the better part of the last 4 or 5 races after having an absolutely electric start to the season. Driver L, Carlos locking up, taking out another driver, and then subsequent. God, I don't even know what word I just tried to say. Subsequently taking out yourself later on in the race. I think you'd have to take an L for that. Team L would have to be McLaren. Oscar out on lap 1, essentially. And then Lando, his pace was just nowhere after they've been looking like the second best team on the grid for the past couple of weeks. And yeah, I think they made a poor call setting up the car for what they thought would be a wet race and running higher downforce, and Lando just struggled all weekend. Well, not all weekend, but he struggled in the race this weekend, and I wasn't really expecting that. Let me see. Let me pull up the result. I don't even remember where Lando finished. I think it was outside of the points though. Oh no, he finished P7. So actually, no, he got a decent result, but it's not where McLaren would have wanted to be. And Lando was 10 seconds off of George in P6, so he really wasn't anywhere near the front runners at all. So yeah, I would say that's not a good result for what McLaren were expecting going into this weekend, but I really think that was a setup issue. They set the car up for what could have been a wet race, and Spa has unpredictable weather, so I can't fault them too much. It's one of those tracks where rain just comes and goes, and then what the really messed up part about Spa is that the track is so large that it can literally be raining in one part of the track and be completely dry and sunny on another part of the track, which makes things super difficult to deal with. Overall, the race, it was all right, man. I give it 5 out of 10. It was right down the middle, average race. Nothing crazy. Jesus Christ, excuse me. Nothing crazy, nothing too out of pocket. Just, your standard race. It was decent. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty of this episode and what I really am excited to talk about and what I really came here to talk about, which is my mid-season driver and team rankings. And where did your favorite driver end up landing on my list? Now, this is my personal opinion, so don't kill me if you don't agree. Actually, I really don't even care. You can kill me. These are my opinions and what I think of everybody's performances halfway through the season. And we'll do a little bit of looking forward throughout the season. Now, gonna have to refresh myself because, God, the F1 season's so long. I mean, we started in, March or early April, and we're already in late July. So there's a lot that's happened over the course of the season. But I tried to take into culmination everybody's total performance and try to think back as to what all that we've seen so far this season. But let's go ahead and get into the rankings. The early ones I'm gonna fly through just because there's a lot of them don't just have a whole lot to talk about this season. So falling at number 21, because we've had 21 drivers participate in races so far, I'd have to put Nick DeVries. Nick DeVries, I mean, you end up in last place when you get dropped not even halfway through the season. I don't think there's too much to talk about in that standpoint. Nick just didn't put in the performances that the Red Bull program were expecting him to, and he just didn't show a whole lot of pace, was struggling in racecraft, and when you're a 28-year-old rookie, your leash is very short. And so I think that Nick just didn't put in the performances, and Formula One is cutthroat, man. Especially when you're in the Red Bull family, it can be very cutthroat. If you're not putting in the performances, then they're not afraid to make a change, and I think they've shown that on multiple occasions. Moving on, at number 20, we have Logan Sargent, Logie Sarge, my dog, the American from Miami, Florida. Just nowhere near his teammate in the first half of the season or the first couple of races was a really bad car. I mean, we saw the image of the Williams floor, and it looked just at the most basic thing that has ever been created as far as being a Formula One level floor. And yeah, Logan just hasn't been anywhere near his teammate. I think he's the only driver left on the grid that hasn't outqualified his teammate. So when that happens, he's just been absolutely dominated by Alex, and Alex has shown that he's one of the best drivers on the grid, and I think that where his placement is on this list will end up showing that. I mean, Logan is right now P19 in the driver standings, one of the only drivers that hasn't scored a point yet, one of those being Nick DeVries and the other being Daniel Ricciardo, who's only 2 races in to his 2023 campaign. So, yeah, that'll net you a P20 in my opinion. Coming in at P19, I put Daniel by default. I think he had a good race in Hungary for that to be his debut. He didn't score points this weekend or last weekend, but I think he'll come good by the end of the season. And we'll just have to wait and see. He got smacked up, I think, a little bit by Yuki this weekend, but he's still adjusting. So I think this is kind of where a good spot for Daniel. It's kind of hard to rank him. I kind of went back and forth and didn't know if I wanted to rank him at all, just because I don't think that was fair. But I think that he's put in decent enough performances to land himself on the list in general. But this is not indicative of what I think that he will do for the rest of the season and saying that he's a bad driver. No, I just think that I can't put him any higher just because he's only 2 races in. I just think that even what he's done in 2 races has been more impressive than what Nick DeVries did in 10 races, or what Logan Sargent has done in 13 races this season. So yeah, that's it for that. At number 18, we got Kevin Magnussen, the Dane. He has had some okay races, only scored a handful of points this season. The Haas hasn't been a very good race car, so I shoot him a little bit of bail with that. But where the reason why he lands so low on the list, I think, is just because he's getting smacked up by Nico. I think Nico is showing that he's a true vet, and that he's very capable of putting in decent performances in a pretty bad car with what I think is the second worst race car on the grid. I think that they're a really decent qualifying car, and I think that Nico is the one doing the extracting of the pace in the car, especially in qualifying. He's put in some really good results, getting into Q3 fairly regularly, considering where they're at and how they land on the totem pole of cars and their pace. Because I mean, when you think about it, you got Red Bull, McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, Aston. That's 5 teams. That's 10 drivers right there. That's your Q3 right there on a regular weekend. So for him to be in Q3 as many times as he has, then I think that, and for him to be putting in the performances relative to his teammate K-Mac, who looked like he was putting in hella great performances last season against Mick Schumacher, and I think that kind of just shows the difference in levels. Nico pretty much just stepped in and said, hey, there's levels to this shit. Like, you did all right last season, but I'm really like that, though. So I think that he's just getting a little bit washed by his teammate, and so that kind of lands him what did I put in? P18, which is exactly where he is in the driver standings in actuality. So I think that aligns pretty well. At P17, I have Valtteri Bottas. Now, I feel like a lot of people, when they hear that, their first thought is going to be, damn, he's low. But I think that him being the veteran in that team and it being so tight, I think Joe has had some bad luck this season. But overall, I think Joe has been the more consistent driver, and you wouldn't really expect that because Valtteri's kind of calling card is his consistency, and I think he's been uncharacteristically inconsistent this season. So I feel like that kind of drops his ranking a little bit, and the Alpha's been pretty bad this season, but there's been some weekends where they could have gotten decent results, and Valtteri, I think, should be more of the team leader and putting in those decent performances where he's the one leading and getting a surprise Q3 or a surprise points finish and stuff like that. And really, that's been Joe this season for me. Even though I think Valtteri is ahead of Joe, he's only scored 1 more point than Joe, 5-4. But I think that Joe has been the more consistent driver over the course of the season, even though it's really, really tight, which is why Joe lands at P16 on my list. And yeah, again, for the reasons that I just mentioned, that he's just been the more consistent driver over the course of the season. And I think for him to be so young and the criticism that he received coming into Formula One, for him to be putting in the performances and really showing that I belong on the grid and I belong with these other 20 drivers and that I can hold my own against a race-winning teammate and a teammate that has finished as high as P2 in the Drivers' Championship. So that's why Joe ends up higher on the list for me. At P15, I have Sir Lancelot Stroll. And again, I feel like that's another one where people are going to be like, damn, that feels really low. But I'm doing a lot of this ranking relative to your teammate. And for Fernando to be putting in regular podiums for a good chunk of the first half of the season and Lance to not have one podium at all, and for him to be so far off of his teammate in the standings, I think is just a little bit ridiculous. And I think Lance is still young, so he still has time to develop. But I think that we all are pretty confident in the fact that I believe that Lance is probably only in that seat because of who his father is and owning the team. So, yeah, it is what it is. I'm not really going to be too apologetic about that. I mean, Lance is in P9 in the driver standings, scoring 47 points to his teammates P3 in the driver standings, scoring 147 points or 449 points. So you're 102 points behind your teammate. That's unacceptable in my opinion. And you're truly getting smacked up. Like you're getting hands and feet put on you. So yeah, that's why Lance is so low on my list and lands himself at P15. Behind the likes of my man that I just mentioned in Haas, Nico Hülkenberg. And for him to come in a year out of Formula One, or no, multiple years out of Formula One, and putting in decent performances and beating up on his teammate and landing himself in where is he at? P14 in the driver's standing, scoring 9 points to his teammates 2 in a car that's absolute shit. Great performance. Hats off. And yeah, I shout out to Nico, man. He's really put in some really good results over the course of the season, with his highest finish being P7 at Australia. So yeah, he's come really good this season. Scored 3 points in the sprint race at Austria. So yeah, he's had some really good results. I think that he's proven that he really deserves a spot on the grid and that he probably shouldn't have been dropped, but the game is the game. So shout out to my man Nico. At P13, we have my dog Yuki Tsunoda, the shortest driver on the grid and the feistiest driver on the grid. Right now, he is P17 in scoring 3 points total this season, with his highest finish being P10 twice. He finished P10 today, or no, P10 3 times. So 1 point each, finishing P10 in Australia, in Azerbaijan, and in Belgium today. But I think he's just been really consistent, especially in the earlier stages of the calendar of the first half of the year. Pretty much he was Mr. P11 for a lot of the early races. And he had a couple stinkers, but I also think that car is an absolute tractor. So I'm basing this relative to what exactly it is that they're driving. So I think that Yuki has put in some really good performances relative to where the car is at. So that's why he's so high on the list. And I think that he's proven that he's actually a really good racing driver. And I know that Red Bull and a lot of fans and stuff were worried about him not being able to keep his cool. And I mean, he's still not really able to keep his cool, but it's not hindering his performance, in my opinion. And a lot of people thought that Daniel would come out right out of the gates and smack Yuki up, and that just has absolutely not been the case. And even I think Ted Kravitz said the other day that, I'm sorry, Yuki, but Daniel's the clear leader of this team now. And I think Yuki kind of put in a performance. I think he heard that and put in a performance today and was like, hey, no, this is my fucking team. Like, I've been one that's been here the past couple years, and I'm the one that's going to put in results. Like, yeah, Pierre was good, but I'm here now, and I'm not just going to let Daniel Ricciardo come in and just take my spot. So I respect that a lot. And so, yeah, shout out to Yuki for his performances so far this season. And I hope that he puts in some more points performances. Hopefully that AlphaTauri can be a lot better than it has been over the course of the season. in the second half. Hopefully they bring some upgrades and try to get back into points because, I mean, the reality is that team won a race 3 years ago. And for them to be within the Red Bull family and to be their sister team, really their junior team, and be nowhere near like fighting for points on a regular basis just is a little bit baffling to me. But moving on, we have in number 12, we have Pierre Gasly. First year in Alpine, and he's put in some okay results. Not really doing what his teammate is doing. I mean, he's close, but not that close. He is on 22 points to Esteban's 35. His highest result was P7 in Monaco. Really good race for him. He took his teammate out in Australia, and then he's had a couple DNFs, which I think really hurt him. They looked strong in Great Britain, and it looked like he was going to get some points in Hungary as well. But yeah, just a lot of bad luck for Pierre. He finished P11 today, which I think is about the maximum that he could have expected. But I feel like he's just still getting adjusted to the car, so maybe I'm giving it a little bit of a benefit of doubt, but I don't think he deserved to be any lower than where he's at in P12 on my rankings. P11, this one's going to be, y'all are probably going to call me harsh for this one, but P11, I have Checo Perez. I think that to have a car like that and to have put in the results that you put in, I think is just unacceptable. Yes, he's P2 in the driver standings, but he's a lot closer to Fernando and Lewis in P3 and P4 than he is to his own teammate who's in P1. He is on 189 points to his teammates 314. Yeah. He is, God, my quick maths are probably gonna be a little bit off, but he looks like 125 points off of his teammate. I mean, he's on pace to be 200 points back of his teammate by the end of the season, which, I mean, like I said, same thing applies from Fernando to Esteban. You just can't be 100-plus points off of your teammate and think that you're going to be high on my rankings. I just think that's unacceptable. His run of form where he wasn't in Q3 for like 5 straight races while his teammate was on pole, unacceptable. I think that he's come good in the past couple of races, but I mean, I'm looking at this, P16 in Monaco, P6 in Canada, like these P6 in Great Britain. Now, these are just pedestrian results. He's won 2 races this season, had some podiums early on. He was really good early on in the season, and I think it started to come good later, but I just think all those P6s in his qualifying performances are just unacceptable. He shouldn't be having to do recovery drives. I'm not going to give you credit for doing a recovery drive when you put the car where it wasn't supposed to be in qualifying in the first place. So yeah, that ain't it for me. Let's continue on. Don't want to go in on Checo too much. P10, I have Esteban. Got on a podium in Monaco. Surprise podium. I think that's probably been one of the biggest surprise podiums of the season so far for me. That was, I believe, his highest result. And a couple P8s, P9, so regular points finishes for Esteban. And like I said, when you really break down where everybody's at as far as the teams and the drivers and how they stack up, to be getting points regularly in a car that's probably, the sixth or seventh best car on the grid. I think pretty stably 6th best car on the grid. Yeah, because you got Red Bull, Aston, Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren. Yeah, so 6th best car on the grid at the moment. It wasn't like that the whole season. McLaren just started coming good on their car. But yeah, I think for them to have what is now, I believe, the 6th fastest car on the grid and him to still be putting in regular points. He got P8 today, so decent, man. He's been really consistent. I believe Esteban is now one of the most underrated drivers on the grid. Like, he's been in that team for a while. He's consistent, always gets a decent result, and just is a really good driver. P9, I have Sir Carlos Sainz, the Spaniard, one of the Spaniards. And I think he's had a decent season. He's only 7 points off of his teammate who's in P5, so it's been really close. Carlos seemed like he was putting in the better results earlier on in the season. He was the more consistent driver. His highest finish being P4 in Bahrain, the first race of the season, but he has a lot of P5s. So he's putting the car about where it should be. I think that Charles is just, while Charles I don't think has been as consistent over the season, his peak has been a lot higher, and Charles is just able to extract that little bit more out of the car. And while Charles has a couple of podiums this season, Carlos has just been kind of consistently P5s and P4s and just regular points. I do think there's a couple of races where he got screwed out of points by Ferrari, but I mean, so has Charles, and that's just Ferrari at that point. And so I can't fault them too much for some of those results, but it is what it is. You gotta play with the hand that you're dealt. Moving on, I have Oscar Piastri at 8. I do think when I do my end of the season rankings, he'll probably be a little bit higher because of just where McLaren were struggling earlier on in the season, and he was getting dominated by Lando early on in the season. Now he's a rookie, so a lot of that is just adjustment. But once the car was good, Oscar has really started putting in the results. I think that he's having a really good rookie season, and he's showing why McLaren took on all of that drama to be able to bring him into the team. And so, yeah, I think he's been really good this season. Can't say too much more. I think he could find his way into the top 6 to 7 by the end of the season if he keeps punching in results. All right. Let's see. I don't think Oscar's gotten a podium yet, too, and I think that'll change very quickly. Yeah, no podium for Oscar. Highest finish being P4 in Great Britain. I think with some better strategy calls and a little bit better wheel-to-wheel driving, he probably could have gotten his podium already, but he'll get it by the end of the season. I'm pretty confident that that Oscar will come good on his podium by the end of the season, and probably a handful of podiums if McLaren keep doing what they're doing and looking as quick as they are. P7, I have George Russell. He's had a couple stinkers this season. Is right now 49 points off of his teammate, which is a pretty sizable gap, but I mean, it's also Lewis Hamilton. So what did you really expect? But yeah, I think George has had an okay season. He's DNF twice, once in Australia. I think that was a mechanical DNF. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was a mechanical DNF. And then Canada, he jacked up his own car, so that's kind of his own problem. But I think he's doing decent to get recovery drives, but his qualifying pace just really hasn't been there. I think it's 7-5 Lewis's way in qualifying, but Lewis has just been getting the better results out of the car. He's had one podium this season in Spain, and a lot of P4s and P5s and P6s. So regular points, but he just hasn't had the heights and the consistent highs that Lewis has had this season. And I think Lewis is really starting to gel with the W14 and just show the type of driver and the level of driver that he is, because obviously George is a race winner and he's a very talented driver, but Lewis is also Lewis, arguably the GOAT. So that's kind of what lands George in P7 right now. Let's see, P6, I have, this is probably the biggest shock, is I have Alex Albon. I think Alex is showing that he is probably the best driver outside of the top 5 teams. And shit, he's better than some of the guys, I think, in the top 5 teams. Lance Stroll. But, and I think he's probably better than Oscar at this point, just pound for pound. If you put him in the same car, I think Alex would be better than Oscar too. And I think he can compete with the likes of like a Russell and a Sainz in the same car. I think he's that good. To be dragging that Williams up and scoring regular points where he has been, I mean, let's just pull up his results. I mean, I know he's P13 in the standings, but I mean, considering that he's driving a Williams, let's really put that into perspective. He got P10 in Bahrain. and then P7 in Canada, which was crazy, P11 in Austria, P8 in Great Britain, and then P11 in Hungary last weekend. Like, to be putting that car where it is, he's gotten a handful of Q3 appearances this season in qualifying. And I think that that's very commendable, and that he's just been so consistent in getting more out of that car than probably where it's at, especially compared to his teammate. Now, his teammate's a rookie and wasn't necessarily a highly touted rookie, but nobody expected Alex to be finishing in points pretty regularly at this point in the season. So that's kind of what lands him so high on my list. I've been really impressed with him, and he's on my short list of driver of the years this season. So yeah, shout out to Alex, man. All right, let's get into the top 5. We have Charles Leclerc in my five position. Really good results for Charles. Some mistakes, I think, but nothing too crazy. He's had 2 DNFs this season. Had a lot of bad luck early on in the season. Yeah, just not really what I expected. Let's see, how many podiums does Charles have this season? He has 3 podiums this season, to his teammates none. I think Ferrari have gypped him out of a lot of like good results, and just dealing with Ferrari. I still want him. I would like to see him outside of a Ferrari car, but yeah, who knows where Charles would be in a better car with a better result. That's kind of what lands him P5 on my rankings. P4, I have Lando Norris. Even when the car was bad, Lando was putting in decent results. And now that the car is good, he's on podiums pretty regularly. I mean, he was still scoring points when the car was shit. So, I mean, P6 in Australia, P9 in Azerbaijan, P9 in Monaco. And then the car became good, and he's been P4, P2, P2. And he had a bad race this weekend, but I don't think the car was set up where he really wanted it to be. But yeah, Lando's been one of the top performers, and again, another driver on the short list. Pretty much everybody left is on the short list of driver of the year for me. Now for my top 3, we have, I mean, we know who's left, but at the number 3 spot, I have Fernando Alonso. Now, I went back and forth for a while about where I wanted to put Fernando and Lewis, and obviously they were going to be right next to each other. I think they've been the 2 best drivers outside of Max this season. I think that Lewis has just been a little bit more consistent, and the car's just been a little bit better for him. Even though, they're neck and neck in the standings. They're only 1 point apart from each other, with Fernando having 149 and Lewis is 148. Fernando has how many podiums this season? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 podiums this season. He was Mr. P3 for a lot of the first half of the season. A couple P2s being Monaco and Canada. Yeah, super consistent. Never been outside the points at all this season. So that's really good. I just think that Lewis is, even when the car wasn't deserving of being on podiums at certain races, I think that Lewis put it on podiums where it maybe shouldn't have been in certain races. And so I think that's where he gets the nod for me. Let's go ahead and see where Lewis is. So that, again, and I guess that moving into that would put Lewis P2. Lewis has 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4 podiums this season. So yeah, 2 less podiums than Fernando. But again, for him to have 2 less podiums and only be 1 point behind, you see that consistency. I mean, his lowest finish was 8th in Austria this season. A lot of P4s, so right outside podiums. And yeah, I think that while he's had a couple of mistakes this season, I think he's been super consistent in extracting the absolute most out of that W14 this season, which is why he lands P2 on my list. And P1, obvious answer, it's Max. Like, there's no need to explain. Hasn't finished lower than P2 this season. It has won 8 races in a row, 10 so far this season. Probably going to break his record for most race wins in a season from last year. Yeah, just untouchable right now. He could finish P2 for the rest of the season and still win the championship. I mean, yeah, he's the best driver on the grid this season. No two ways about it. Yeah, that wraps up my list, man. Let me know what you guys think. If you disagree, if you agree, let me know in the comments. You think I'm an idiot? Let me know that too. I really don't care. I think you're the idiot, but I think that overall that was a pretty solid list, and I think I was pretty fair to everybody. I probably was harsh on a couple people, but if I was harsh on you, it probably because you deserved it. And who cares what I think anyway? I'm not in the car. But yeah, let's move on to the team rankings. This episode I think is gonna end up being my longest episode by a wide margin. We're already over an hour in, and I appreciate you guys if you're still here. Yeah, let's run through the team rankings real quick. I'm starting to get hungry. It's a little bit past lunchtime for me, and my stomach growling at me. Let's see. Team rankings. Number 10, Alpha Tauri. I think that car is just shit. And I think that they're a mess, and they really don't know where they're going as far as direction. Number 9, Alfa Romeo. Had some okay results, but again, they just seem to always find themselves in no man's land. Number 8, Haas. All these guys are interchangeable, to be honest. They all kind of suck. A lot of this follows where they end up in the Constructors' Championship. But number 7, Williams. I think that them hiring James Vowles to be their team principal was a great move. I think that he's already produced some good results and started to shift the environment of Williams. If they can just get a good cash flow going in and get some good aerodynamicists and engineers and guys to develop the car and really push the limits, I think that they could return to good form that they were in. I think, what was that, 2017? When they finished P3 in the Constructors' Championship. So we'll see. Number 6, Alpine. I mean, I said it. They were the 6th fastest car for the most part of the season. Number 5, Ferrari. They probably should be higher, but I knocked them down a couple points just because of their poor strategy calls and poor leadership and the fact that they just can't get on one accord with their drivers. They don't listen to the drivers. They kind of leave them out to dry most of the time, and that's just super frustrating. So I'm penalizing them a little bit for that. Number 4, Aston. I think if you asked me this 4-5 races ago, they'd be number 2. But I think that they fell off the wagon a little bit, and they need to do some serious development of the car before they lose P3 in the Drivers' Championship, before they start losing places in the Constructors' Championship. Yeah, because the form that McLaren's on, they could run up a lot of podiums and start snatching positions. Ferrari's still going to be there fighting for podiums too. Yeah, so that lands Aston at 4, McLaren at 3. I think for them to come from where they came from at the beginning of the season and looking like one of the worst teams on the grid to being arguably the second best team on the grid, I think that is really good for them. And so, yeah, that lands them a little bit higher. Being able to develop mid-season is just, that's bonus points for me. This is my opinion. I think that it's so hard to develop mid-season that if you can do it and jump places that many places in the middle of the season, that I think that's just really, really good for them. And shout out to the McLaren's development team and the drivers for really pushing them to do better. Number 2, or that will put McLaren at 3. Number 2, I have Mercedes just for consistency purposes. I think that they've been out of the best of the rest teams, being those 4 teams: Aston, McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes. I think Mercedes has been the most consistent, and so that's why they end up P2. And I think number 1 is obvious. Red Bull, they produced the best car. Max is dominating, and even Checo has won some races this season. I mean, they're the only team to win races this season, so that's just going to put you number 1. Oh, man. Just wanted to touch on cost cap talk has been bubbling up some more. It seems that it's been established that Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Red Bull are the three teams under fire and under investigation right now for cost cap infringements. More developments in that. Like I said, I think that if it's Red Bull again, you gotta throw the book at them and you gotta get serious this time. I don't know, man. I don't know what that looks like. And I know I said stripping titles, and I don't think that necessarily is going to happen. But if you broke the cost cap again, what else is there to do? Like, if you don't strip the title, then nobody's going to take it serious, and then you really can't punish anybody else. So we'll see. I'm not really surprised by the Aston talk, to be honest, for them to be arguably one of the worst or second worst team on the grid last year, and then come straight out the gates and be on the podium for like 5 or 6 straight races to start the season. I'm not too surprised about that. Merc, I mean, I'm not really surprised about that either. I think that they've been bringing upgrades left and right. Like, they're bringing more major upgrades through the second half of the season. Like, they're bringing another big upgrade package. Now we'll see what that actually looks like. I mean, it always looks great on the simulator, and you think that you're going to gain X amount of time, but sometimes it just doesn't work like that. So we'll just have to wait and see how that develops for them. Looking forward to the second half of the season. Again, we got a month off. We'll be right back at Zandvoort August 25th weekend, and we'll just have to see what kind of development the teams have brought going into the second half of the season and where it shakes up. Everybody's still holding their breath and crossing their fingers, waiting on that non-Red Bull win. And I think that it'll be a celebration like the Super Bowl when somebody finally wins a race that isn't Red Bull. Hopefully it's this season, but we'll just have to wait and see. Some of my favorite circuits are coming up in the second half of the season. We got Zandvoort, I really enjoy watching, especially in qualifying. It's great. Singapore, we got Coda, Brazil. Yeah, we got some really good races coming through the second half of the season. Let's see, what else do we got on there? Japan. Suzuka is a great circuit, especially in qualifying. Qatar's back. Yeah, so we got how many races left? Monza. I forgot about Monza, the Temple of Speed. Really high speed. If top speed is your thing, Monza is the race to watch. So we got Zandvoort, Monza, Singapore, Suzuka, Qatar, Coda, Mexico, Brazil, Vegas, Abu Dhabi. 10 races left in the season. And yeah, we'll wait and see what happens. We'll see how many races it takes for Max to lock up the championship officially. I mean, we know it's actually over, but when he actually gets handed the trophy, we'll see. I'm thinking like Suzuka again. Shit, maybe Singapore. Actually, you know what? My bet's on Singapore. I don't know how the math works out, but I think Singapore, he'll probably lock up the championship and just be cruising for the last handful of races. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see if any of the other 4 teams will be able to catch up and start snagging some races from Red Bull. But yeah, man, I appreciate you guys sticking out this episode. It's been a long one. We're about an hour and 10 minutes in, and I can feel it too. I'm not used to talking this long, especially on a monologue. Sometimes it gets tough being here with nobody else to talk to and just kind of going off on monologues, because I feel like I'll be rambling and ranting, but that's kind of the whole purpose. And we'll see. I don't know what the future holds as far as like co-hosts and stuff like that. I don't really like working with people that I'm not cool with on a personal level. And they would have to be about as passionate of a fan as I would have to be, so that we could really get in depth and go back and forth and stuff like that. But who knows what's on the cards for the future. Yeah, this has been episode 27, man. I really appreciate you guys sticking this one out with me. Again, let me know what you thought about the rankings. Let me know what you're looking forward to in the second half of the season. And I will see you guys next weekend. We'll see what we have to talk about then. Hopefully some big silly season changes. Hopefully something crazy happens. And I got a big topic to talk about next weekend. But yeah, let's keep the ball rolling on this, man. Make sure you follow all of my social media pages at Naldo Formula One to stay up to date with what's going on in Formula One and the content and what I'm doing. And yeah, I will see you guys on the next one. Peace.